Hey everybody, we're going to be going into our third episode of the Web Fundamentals Workshop, and today we'll be covering some super basics of CSS. Now, we're going to be learning about how to link a CSS file to an HTML file. We're going to learn what a typical CSS file looks like, as well as some basic styling with color, font sizing, and positioning. Now, before we start, some disclaimers first. Now, CSS is a styling tool, and there are also many other styling tools like Tailwind, which are used a little bit more often these days, but CSS still remains quite dominant as a styling tool. Now, CSS, there's a lot of stuff that you have to memorize, and don't waste your effort too much on memorizing them, and we'll have a cheat sheet to use, as well as there's many cheat sheet on Google, on MZN Docs. It's a lot of those, so don't focus too much on memorizing. Just learn how to look up in a cheat sheet or learn how to Google properly. All right, let's get started. So what you're seeing here is the homework from last lesson, which was to build a basic blog on HTML. And the code will be available in the description, but all it is just some title, a date and a name, a picture, some text, as well as a contact form below here. So if your blog doesn't look exactly like this, it's okay. But for example, if you're having trouble putting in the image, make sure you ask us questions on the Discord or in the comments below. Okay. Now, this blog, although it looks okay, it feels a little bit boring. It feels like we can put a little bit more color and stuff into it. So that's what we're going to be doing today. But before we get started, we have to make some changes to our HTML file that aren't really going to affect the website visually. So I'm going to close down the website here, and let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is to surround everything we have right now with the body tag. Now, the reason why I'm using the body tag here is because the body tag indicates to the website that everything in between it is supposed to be determining what's actually visually shown on the website itself. Like you can see over here, all the elements and stuff like that. And this is important because we also have something called the head tag. And what's in between the head tag is basically all the information about the website that you wouldn't really be able to see, so like the header information. All right, so for example, in the header, you might have something like the title of the website. So you can see over here, for example, the title of this website is called Lesson 2 Solution. And maybe we want the title of our Bear Blog website to be called something like, I don't know, Bear Blog. Okay, now I introduced the header tag because this is super important when we want to link a CSS file to an HTML file. And I'm going to paste a line of code that I don't have, so let me go back and copy it. There we go. Okay, so this is one of the many things that you don't have to memorize. We'll have it available on our cheat sheet for you to reference. But all it is it's just essentially telling this HTML where to find the CSS style sheet. And yeah, the only thing you really have to watch out for when you copy and paste with this is that you can see over here the path to the style sheet. You have to be careful, make sure you're actually pointing to your style sheet. All right. Now, before we move in, I just want to introduce one last type of tag, and this is called the div or the division. And I'm going to surround everything up to contact form with div. There we go. So I surrounded the entire section of the website that starts at Grizzly Bears in Canada and all the way up to just before the contact form. So where the actual content of the website is. Now, there's a couple reasons why we use this. Number one is for readability. So if you click on this arrow here, you can close it down. And don't worry, you can do this in most IDEs. And this makes it a lot more readable and makes coding a lot easier because as you can see, we can just collapse down everything about the blog itself and then work on other stuff like the contact form with this being hidden. Okay, the more important reason is because when we use a container or div like this, we can style everything within here in one go. Now, you may not know what I'm talking about right now, but I'll make a demonstration later to really show it. All right, I'm going to open up the website again. And I'm going to open up the CSS tab here. Okay, the code we had here is actually part of the solution for homework 2. That's just helping make sure that the image shows properly. Okay, so let's get into the basic structure of a CSS file. So it's going to be a lot of these things. Okay, a lot of some element and squiggly bracket and a lot of these. And let me explain each component. This right here in the top left image is essentially what is being styled. So essentially what it's doing is, hey, I want image to be styled according to whatever is within these squiggly brackets over here. So this is basically telling it, hey, I want to style images. And this can be different stuff as well. Now, inside here, we have width 8 centimeters, height auto, and pretty self-explanatory, but width is going to be the attribute, and we're going to put a value to it. We have a semicolon to separate everything, and then another attribute and another value that we attributed to it, and another semicolon. And there's going to be a lot more of these. All right, so let's get started. First, let's explain how we can tell the CSS what we want to style. Okay, so there's 4 different ways we can tell CSS what we want to style. We can style literally everything using root. We can style just one type of element. For example, we want to style all H1 elements. And by the way, this is what we were using here. This is essentially how we want to style every image element. There's also class and ID, which you may not have heard yet, but we'll get into that soon. Okay, so let's start with root, or everything. So if you want to apply a style to literally everything in a website, you would be doing it in root. Now, you wouldn't be doing this quite often, but one way that you would be styling in the root is, for example, let's say the background color of the website. Being white and all, it's kind of bland. So let's set the background color to beige. And there you have it. The entire website now has a background color of beige. Okay, that was self-explanatory. Let's move on to tag types. Okay, so for example, H1. So by putting H1 here, I'm basically telling, hey, I want to style every H1 element according to whatever's in these squiggly brackets here. Okay, so let's do something like this. So H1, I don't know, let's set the font size as 60 pixels. Nice and big. There we go. So our H1, which is Grizzly Bears in Canada, is now 60 pixels. Now you don't usually want to style things by calling the tag type. And the reason why is some accidents may happen. So let's say, for example, we have the contact form as an H1 as well. But then you see, contact form is also big. Now it's 60 pixels. And you may not have intended for this to happen. You may have been just looking at Grizzly Bears in Canada. You may have just seen that it's an H1 and said, hey, it's an H1, I want to set it at 60 pixels, so all H1s become 60 pixels. But then what happened was that all the other H1s on the website also became 60 pixels large, which you may not have intended. So usually I discourage this. You wouldn't want to do this too much. Now instead, we want to use something like a class or an ID, and they're quite similar in the way that you apply them. So for example, if we want to apply a class, I go over here and set the class prop and give it a class name. So for example, I could do class equals to, I don't know, something like title. Okay. Now to point to everything that has the class of title, we do this. Dot class name. Okay, so by saying dot title, I'm saying, hey, I want to style everything that has a class name of title in whatever I define here within these squiggly brackets here. So for example, let's go back to font size. I want to set this to 40 pixels. And now everything that is a class of title can now be set to 40 pixels. Now the reason why I prefer this over just using element is because you can see here I have to actually set the class's title for the style to be applied, so there's less of a chance for there to be accidents where I style something unintentionally. Okay, let's get into IDs next. So let's say I want to just style this little section over here by author's name and today's date, which is within these H3 tags here. So I'm going to give it an ID of, I don't know, date, name. There we go. Okay, so the way you point to it is by doing the following. Hashtag ID name. Let's say I want to set a font size. I don't know, I think the font's too big. I'm going to set it as 14 pixels. And there you have it. So ID acts basically the same as class, except with class, you can set multiple different elements as the same class. Okay, so let me show you an example. For example, let's say, I guess, okay, let's do it with the text here. So with the P here, I can go and set class equals the title, and now everything here will be giant 40 pixel font that be assigned to anything that has a class name of title. Now you wouldn't be able to do this with ID because ID can be only applied to one element in the entire website. Okay, so I'm just gonna delete all the styling we did except the background image, background color, I mean. So let's get into some actual styling. Okay, let's get into color first. So we've already gone over background color, but I just want to go into a little bit more detail. Okay, so let's go back to our title element, Grizzly Bears in Canada. Let's say I want to change the color to red and the background color to brown. And there you have it. So essentially what it is like the color you can probably think of as like, you know, the color of text in the Google Doc. And the background color is essentially just the color that's applied to the entire element over here. Now, you may notice that even though our text is only over here, the background color spans the entire row. And the reason why is because for most tags, they'll span the entire row by default. And to confirm this, we can use a tool that is super useful in web development, so make sure you're using this quite often. You can inspect element. Control-Shift-C or F12, and you'll be able to see that you can see in this kind of blue shade over here is essentially what the element is covering. And as you can see, it's covering the entire row and not just the text itself. So just, you can see over here with the h1.title, it's like the h1 element is covering the entire row despite the fact that the text actually only covers this little bit over here. Okay, I'm going to close our tool over here. We'll get back to using this a lot more. And I just want to do one last thing before I move on. So remember how we surrounded all the content of the blog, so up to know further about Grizzly Bears, click here with this div over here. I'm going to show you why a div is super powerful right now. So let's give this div a class of, I don't know, blog content. Okay, so let's say, I'm looking at this and I feel like just having the background be plain is boring. So I want just the blog section to have a nice, you know, it's kind of bare pause background to make it look cuter. So here's what you can do. So remember we set the class name of our div as blog content. And you can use an attribute called background image. And what you do is you go over here to your Google image, copy the image address, and then put it in background image and this URL function kind of thing over here, and put it in as a string. And there you have it. Our entire content section is now all bare pause. Very nice. Okay, let's get into a little bit more about text. Okay, so we're going to be editing our title again. So what we've been editing so far is the color and the background color, which I'm going to get rid of because it's kind of ugly. Well, let's mess around with the title over here. Okay, so there's a couple of attributes that have to do with text. And I'm going to go over all of them. So let's go. First one you've already seen, font size. And you can define this using pixels. Let's say like 64 pixels or something like that. The next one is going to be the font family, which is, for example, sans serif, Times New Roman, stuff like that. It's just going to change the style of your font. And what's cool about font family attribute is that you can set a bunch of backup fonts. Okay, the reason why we do this is because sometimes if you want to import a fancy font from Google, you can Google how to do that, by the way. But if you want to import a fancy font from the Google API, what might happen is that maybe the API endpoint wouldn't work and you wouldn't be able to access the font. And what would happen after that by default is that you'd be pushed back to the default font, which is usually just Times New Roman, which might not be the look that you're going for. Maybe you just want this kind of look. Then you'd be able to set a backup font like this. For example, if sans serif doesn't load, I'm going to use Arial. So essentially, what's going to happen is it's going to first try to load sans serif, and most of the time it's successful, but on the off chance it's not, we're going to be loading Arial instead. All right, let's move on. Okay, so next is going to be the font weight, which is basically telling the website how bold you want your text to be. And font weight is actually on a scale from 100, 200, 300, all the way up to 900, with 100 here being the most thin and 900 being the most thick. Now I want something in the middle, like a nice 600, so it's going to look something like this. There you have it. Okay, next let's get into font style. So font style is essentially only used if you want to make something italic. So there you have it. Super simple, just set font style as italic and make sure you don't confuse font style with font family. Okay. Now one last thing is going to be text align. And you're probably familiar with this, but you can set your text align as center or as right. And boom, there you have it. So I'm going to set this as center to make it look a little bit more like a title. And there we go. All right, so those are the 5 attributes that have to do with text. And make sure you understand this super well because we're going to get into a little bit more of a complicated topic. Okay. All right. So I'm going to get into sizing now. But before we get right into it, we're going to have to explain a couple keywords. Okay. We have the content. So if you remember using our Control-Shift-C or Inspect Element tool, we were able to see that the blue here is actually the content. So this is actually what the content is. And as you can see here, it's like what's in the center over here. The padding is going to be the region in between the border and the content. And usually this is just white space. And then there's the border. And then outside of the border is the margin, which determines how far away our element should be from any other element. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate that using our bare image over here. Okay, so let's get right into it. So we have this stuff over here. And what I wanted to show first is the content itself. So let's say we go to Control-Shift-C and you can see that our entire thing is going to be blue, which means what we see here is going to be what's part of the content. Now, width and height are 2 attributes that we can use to determine the size of our content itself. So for example, we can manipulate this, let's turn it into like 10 centimeters, Or alternatively, you can use like 300 pixels or something like that. Let's make this bigger, like 600 pixels. And if we go back and use Control-Shift-C, you'll be able to see that, yeah, what we did just now just made our content bigger. Okay, for the next part, I'm going to first show the border by doing border style solid. So hopefully you can see a border on the outside over here. It's actually kind of barely visible. I'm going to make the border thicker. There we go. So now you can see we have a border like so. And when we use our inspect element tool, you'll be able to see that our border is 10 pixels and highlighted in yellow over here. Okay, let's say I want some white space in between my actual content and the border itself. Here's what you can do. You can set a padding of, let's say, 20 pixels. And there you have it. Now, between the border and our content itself, there's going to be 20 pixels all around. Now, keep in mind, with any of these elements, you can always just set for one specific side. What I mean by that is, for example, let's say I don't want some white space all around. I just want some white space on the left. Padding left. And there you have it. Our white space for the other three sides are gone, but our white space for the left side is still 20 pixels. Okay, I'm going to put it back to just padding. Okay, and finally we have the margin, which essentially tells us how far we want the edge of our border to be from any other element. So for example, if I set a margin of 100 pixels, what happens here is that our element is going to be at least 100 pixels away from any other element. So if we Control-Shift-C, you'll be able to see that we have this 100 pixel dead zone where there's no other element. Yeah, you can see that it's at least 100 pixels away from any other element, and this is how it's supposed to be. And again, just like with padding, we can just set for one side for margin. So for example, in this example here, what I did was I just set a margin on the left side, and you can see our orange region only really extends out to the left, so our dead zone is only left 100 pixels. Okay. Now I'm speeding through this quite a bit, so make sure you do ask any questions you have underneath in the description below. Let me go over a little bit more examples. So let's go back to our title here, and let's make this a little bit neater. Okay, so we're going to keep everything about our font. I think I like my font quite a bit right now, so I'm just going to be styling the sizing and the positioning. Okay, so let's set a border. So let's actually start showing a border. Well, let's make it a dotted border. Boom. Now, by default, the color of the border is going to be the same as the color that we've assigned the element, but if we want this to be a different color, we can always set just border color. Let's say I want black border. And there you have it. We have a black dotted border. Okay. Now, let's say I want some white space in between our text and the border. So we're going to have padding to be, let's say, 200 pixels. Okay, that's too big. I don't know. Let's do like 50 pixels. And there we go. All right. You know what? I think maybe I want the border to not really show on the left and right. Let's do this. Border width, border left is going to be 0 pixels, and border right is going to be 0 pixels. And there you have it. Our border is going to be 0 pixels on the left and right, and only showing on the top and bottom. Let's make the top and bottom borders a little bit thicker. Border top, let's make it, I don't know, 5 pixels. Border bottom, let's also make it 5 pixels. Huh, it's not showing. That's odd. Let's do this instead. border width as 5 pixels. Okay, there we go. All right, so let me explain what I just did. So essentially what I did was I set all 4 border widths to 5 pixels, but then right after that, I set the left border and the right border to 0 pixels. So essentially this 5 pixel thing was overwritten. And the left and right border is now 0 pixels, but since we didn't mess with the top and bottom borders after we set the border width as 5 pixels here, then we have the top and bottom borders as 5 pixels still. And finally, let's work with margin a little bit. I think I want my title to be a little bit further away from everything else. So let's set a margin, I don't know, bottom as 100 pixels as well. And there you have it. Our title over here, the bottom of the title is going to be at least 100 pixels away from everything else over here. All right. Let's get into position absolute, our final topic for today. Okay, position absolute is actually not a really good tool in terms of practice, but it is sometimes useful if you want to get something done really quickly and you can't really bother with the padding margin and the width and stuff like that. An example would be if we want to take the author's name and date to somewhere like the top right. Okay, so let's do that. So I have ID of date name, so I'm going to keep using that. So remember to reference an ID, just do hashtag and then the ID name. So what I'm going to do here is I want this to like not be here, and let's try to move it to the top right. So I'm going to do this by using something called position absolute. And essentially what position absolute does is it enables whatever element you're pointing to ignore everything else and have it be ignored by everything else. Okay, here's what I mean by that. Remember we set a 100 pixel dead zone for our bear, right? Remember our bear picture, remember we set a 100 pixel dead zone. We want nothing else in here, but look what we have here. In our orange dead zone over here, we have the author's name and date. And it's because we set the position as absolute and it's essentially just being ignored. So this is not really caring and it's just showing up inside the dead zone when it's not really supposed to be. And it's all because we set position absolute. Okay, now position absolute is powerful because of the following 4 attributes: left, top, bottom, and right. Okay, so these 4 attributes, what they do is they set the distance that the corresponding edge of our component is from its parent edge. Okay, let me explain what that means. So let's say, for example, we set left as, I don't know, 300 pixels. Okay, what did I do just now? Okay, so what I did was I set the left edge, remember the left edge of our author's name and date, to be 300 pixels away from the left edge of the parent component. And in this case, the parent component is going to be this container we made called block content. Okay, so to repeat that, with setting left as 300 pixels, all I did was I set the distance between the left edge of this by author's name and today's date, so like where my mouse kind of is right here, to be 300 pixels away from the left edge of our parent component, which is around here. Okay, and this works essentially the same for everything else. So for example, let's set the top as equal to, I don't know, 10 pixels. Okay, so what I did just there was I set the top edge, so this, you can see this orange, so this top tip of the orange, to be 10 pixels away from the top edge of our parent component, which is like at the top of the website over here. So I set it to be 10 pixels away. Okay, now if we want this to show up on the top right, I'm going to set right as 0 pixels and top as 0 pixels. Okay. Let me see if I can push it a little further up. I think there we go. I think this is nice. Okay, so this is high-key hard coding, which is not the best practice, but it's good when we want to get something done quick. And all we did over here was by setting right as 0px, essentially what I did is I set the right edge of my author's name and today's date to line up with the right edge of our parent component, which is right here. So as you can see, the right edges line up like so. And by setting the top as negative 20 pixels, what I did was, so okay, let me set this as 0 pixels for example's sake. So you see this orange region over here. I set the top region of the top edge of the orange region to be 20 pixels above the top edge of our parent component by setting this as negative 20 pixels. And there you have it. It's nicely showing on the top right, like so. Okay, so I've gone over some basic styling, enough knowledge for you to move on to the next lessons within the Web Fundamentals workshop. But make sure you visit our cheat sheet for every other element, as well as other cheat sheets online, and ask any questions you may have about CSS or anything else about the web workshop in Discord or in the comments section below. Thanks for watching, and have a good day. Bye.